Hello and welcome to this episode of Class is in Session. I'm your host, Ashley Stevens, and this show on Black Enterprise highlights the latest happenings inside HBCU classrooms. We highlight public policy issues facing these historic institutions, and we also shine a light on HBCU students, leaders, and alum who are making major moves in business, the arts, entertainment, health, and education. Super excited today to talk to an HBCU alum who is making major moves in the legal field. Attorney Rodney K. Strong is widely considered one of the nation's foremost experts in the area of procurement disparity research and supplier diversity program development. Attorney Strong has strong ties, literally, to Atlanta's business community, spending 4 decades and counting, fighting for economic inclusion and civil rights. Dating back to his days at Morehouse College, where he volunteered on the campaigns of Atlanta's first Black mayor, Maynard Jackson, and Ambassador Andrew Young, he spent several years as the City of Atlanta's Director of Contract Compliance, making sure that there was equity for Black business owners. Today, Attorney Strong continues his work as Black businesses are being targeted and shut down out of major government contracts due to changing policies, restricting diversity, equity, and inclusion. So today we'll speak with him on ways that his law firm, Griffin Strong PC, is helping minority business owners navigate this shifting federal landscape. Hello and welcome, Attorney Rodney K. Strong.
Hello, glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. Listen, out of all the things you're doing in your schedule, we appreciate you taking time here for Classes in Session. Just to kick us off, tell us a little bit about you. Where are you from? And tell us, how and why you chose an HBCU to go to school.
Yeah, well, I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee, and I grew up during the Civil Rights Movement, and I was really influenced heavily by Dr. King. And I made a decision that I wanted to go to Morehouse. That was my number one choice for college. And I talked to a number of adults that I respected. Many of them thought that that was also a great choice. And fortunately, I was able to go to Morehouse. And so I have not regretted it. It was probably the best decision I ever made in my life.
That's incredible. And in what ways did Morehouse help to shape you personally and professionally as you have pursued an extensive career in law?
Well, I grew up very close to the Black business community in Memphis, the historic Black business community. My great uncle, my grandfather's brother, was vice president and actuary for Universal Life Insurance Company, which was a BE top African American life insurance company. And my father owned a restaurant, a nightclub down on Beale Street. I knew most of the Black business people in Memphis. And I was also involved in politics. I got involved in politics because I had a chance to see firsthand how important public policy was. I can remember segregation, and I can remember everything changing when I was a child. And so I knew that public policy was important. I volunteered on campaigns in Memphis. And when I got to Atlanta, I found a very similar business community. I got to know the business people on Auburn Avenue and on Martin Luther King Drive that were very similar to the people I had known on Beale Street in Memphis. I got to know a lot of the executives at Citizens Trust Bank and Atlanta Life Insurance Company who were very similar to the people I knew at Universal and at Tri-State Bank in Memphis. And just found that Atlanta was a welcoming environment for me, in addition to the wonderful education and the number of just brilliant classmates that I ended up having. I'd never been surrounded by that many brilliant young Black men before, and all of us trying to figure out how we can make a difference for the community.
Awesome. That's encouraging and empowering to hear that you were surrounded by brilliant minds, like-minded young Black men. I wanted to go back because you said you were influenced a lot by Dr. King. How did your interest in and passion for civil rights, spill over from your Memphis days to Atlanta specifically and working on campaigns there?
Well, Dr. King came to Memphis for the March Against Fear that was started by James Meredith, who integrated the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss. And after the passage of the '64 Civil Rights Act, a lot of the big cities like Memphis and Atlanta immediately took down the white and colored water fountains, and Black people began to go to, public facilities. But in Mississippi, especially in the rural areas, people were still afraid to go into places that historically they hadn't gone to. And so Meredith started a march out of Memphis. He was going to march from Memphis to Jackson, Mississippi. On the second day of the march, he was shot down. And so all of the civil rights leaders came to Memphis, and they organized in Memphis to lead a march, to take off the march. So Dr. King, the leaders of the NAACP, all the other organizations came to Memphis. And this was during the time when Dr. King was emphasizing what he calls silver rights, economic justice. He had started Operation Breadbasket, which was headed up by Dr. Joe Boone, Reverend Joe Boone at that time, and before Jesse Jackson took it over. And he was doing a lot of things on economic justice. So all of his speeches in Memphis were about how, he was basically used the phrase that what good does it do to have integrated lunch counters if we can't buy a hamburger? And he said that economic justice is the next phase of the civil rights movement. He was pushing simultaneously for economic justice and for housing. The housing bill, the open housing bill, or the Fair Housing Law of 1968, was passed after he died, after he was assassinated. It was passed a week after he was assassinated. It was being filibustered in the Senate at the time that he was assassinated. So he was pushing simultaneously for open housing and for economic justice. And because of my exposure to the historic Black business community, I recognized that that was the next phase of the civil rights movement. How do we, as Dr. King so eloquently put it, how do we integrate the money?
How do we integrate the money? And the profound words by Dr. King, you consider the lunch counter, but still can't buy a hamburger because of economic injustice. So I think it's important that you've gone into this work. Tell us though, obviously the passion is there and has long roots in history with with civil rights. How did you gain an interest in law, specifically working in the area of procurement? I can usually never say that word, procurement.
Yeah, well, I mentioned the fact that, I came to Atlanta and immediately got to know various people in the Black business community, and got involved in Andy Young's campaign. He was running for Congress. He was the first African American elected to Congress from the Deep South since Reconstruction. And I worked on his campaign. It was my freshman year in college. Myself and a number of my friends worked on that campaign, my classmates. And afterwards, we were introduced to Maynard Jackson, who was about to run for mayor the next year. And we organized, got involved in his campaign. And when he won, his first order of business was to try to deal with making sure that the contracts that the city of Atlanta let were going to be equitable, and that for the first time, African Americans were going to be allowed to do business with the city. The city of Atlanta did less than 1%, actually less than 1/10 of 1% of their business with Black-owned businesses when Maynard Jackson was elected in 1973. And so very frequently, we had an organization that we had started on campus called the University Movement for Black Unity. And Maynard worked with us after he was elected, and we supported him in a lot of those efforts. And so when I graduated, I went to see the mayor and asked him to hire me to work with him. And I ended up working with him for 3 years before I went to law school. So uh, the uh, Atlanta was at the forefront of taking businesses from the historic African American business community and making them mainstream multi-million dollar businesses. A good example would be Pascal's, which was a restaurant and a hotel on Martin Luther King Drive. And negotiations were held to partner them with a airport concession company out of my hometown, actually, Dobbs Houses out of Memphis. And they became an airport concession business. And they were among the first African American businesses to do airport concessions. And of course, you can go into the Atlanta airport now and still buy Pascal's chicken, just like you were down on Auburn Avenue.
That's a really big deal. Lifting up businesses so they can have multiple avenues to thrive. And you're right. I have definitely seen Pascal's in the Atlanta airport. And that's interesting to know that, again, your passion and grassroots ties to the historic business community then led to you really pursuing how you can help improve businesses on the legal side. So tell us about the mission and background of your law firm, Griffin and Strong PC.
Yeah, well, one of the things about the area of uh, contracting, public contracting, or what we call in Atlanta equal business opportunity, is that it's constantly being contested in the courts. There's opposition from conservative legal foundations to any type of what they call affirmative action. And so um, there were constant legal challenges to the program. By the time I became director, I had already graduated from law school and was an attorney. And so I joined the National Lawyers Panel for the Minority Business Enterprise Legal Defense Fund while I was serving as director of contract compliance for the city of Atlanta. And we fended off several legal challenges to our program while I was director. But ultimately, the United States Supreme Court ruled in a case, uh, City of Richmond versus J.A. Croson, that you had to meet a constitutional standard that the courts call strict scrutiny, which means you have to show a compelling governmental interest to favor one organization on the basis of race or to take race into consideration in the awarding of contracts, and that you had to tie that to, this compelling governmental interest. You had to make sure that any steps you took were what they call narrowly tailored, which means that you had to be careful in terms of making sure that they were limited in terms of time and duration, and they were tied to an actual injury that you could tie. And so I recognized that there was an opportunity for the city of Atlanta to respond to that. And we did the first major disparity study in the country, and we were able to get our program going again after a hiatus. We basically decided that we were going to bid as few contracts as possible during the period it took us to do our study until we did our new program. And then under our new program, of course, it became a model that other cities around the country, other states around the country used. And so I recognized that the work we were doing in Atlanta needed to be done in other places. And I started my firm so that we could represent governments and help them conduct their disparity studies, draft their legislation, develop their programs around procurement inclusion. And so that's how we got started.
That's interesting. So that means that you all help businesses who are in need of your support across, several states, not just the state of Georgia.
Yes. When we started our firm, our first client was the city of Newark, New Jersey. We worked on their disparity study. And then we were hired by the city of Phoenix, Arizona, to draft their program. They referred us to the city of Tucson. Then from there, we did our first major study as a consulting on our consulting side of our business with the city of St. Louis. And since then, we've done business with close to 100 different jurisdictions around the country, including, places as far away from Atlanta as Tacoma, Washington. And we're currently doing work in Rhode Island and Connecticut and, Texas, all over the United States.
Awesome. So I'm sure in 40 years of doing this work and counting, you've seen the gamut of issues and challenges facing businesses and business owners. Can you tell us, Attorney Strong, what are some of today's top challenges, specifically facing women and minority-owned businesses?
Well, right now, what we are seeing is a concerted attempt to roll back some of the gains that we've made. And so not only are there attacks on public programs, but there have been recent orders that have come down from the federal government that call into question uh, corporate supplier inclusion and diversity programs. And so uh, now there are certain corporations that have historically done supplier diversity programs and have worked to ensure that there was a level playing field for African American and other minority businesses or disadvantaged business enterprises. And those companies are reconsidering or structuring their policies. And so this is a very challenging time because many of our businesses rely on federal, state, and local contracts, but also corporate contracts, because, of course, there's a challenge right now to the legal challenge from one of the conservative organizations to the National Minority Supplier Development Council. I was just with the president, Don Craven, last week at the recently, and so um, it's a challenging environment that we face because of the onslaught from every conceivable direction to African American businesses that want to scale into corporate and government contracting.
Really interesting, very interesting. And as you mentioned, I know there's a lot of shifting policies. We were fortunate at Black Enterprise to recently have a piece by your team members called The U.S. DOT is Trying to Erase What Cannot Be Erased with the Interim Final Rule. And I think essentially what has happened is, as of last fall, the United States Department of Transportation issued an interim final rule that has modifications to the disadvantaged business program and also the airport concessions program. I know you mentioned that earlier about Pascal's. So in essence, I think it's, and please help us, our audience to understand, it sounds like it's harder for women and racial minority groups to identify as disadvantaged when applying for these programs. So please just walk us through that. What has changed? Is the interim final rule really final? And if it is, what does this mean for businesses to try to recertify and try to get contracts in these spaces as a disadvantaged business?
Yeah, the interim final rule has actually become a final rule now, and the there is a federal program called the Surface Mass Transportation Act has a federal program called the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. Historically, if you were a member of a minority group, then there was a rebuttable presumption that you were disadvantaged. So you didn't have to show any proof of your specific particularized disadvantage. If you were an African American, you were presumed to be disadvantaged. It was a rebuttable presumption. So someone could come in and say, well, I don't think that Rodney Strong is disadvantaged for these reasons. And of course, they'd have to consider those. But it was presumed that I would be disadvantaged because of my race. That had been litigated in court. There was a court case called the Mid-America Milling case. And the Minority Business Legal Defense Fund and Democracy Forward and some major plaintiffs, National Association of Minority Contractors and Atlanta Airport Minority Advisory Council, a couple other groups, were able to get intervener status in that case. And so what happened was that the federal government had hoped to settle with the plaintiffs in that case and come to a legal conclusion through a court that the presumption of disadvantage was unconstitutional. Once the groups that I mentioned were able to get intervener status in the case, it was clear that that was going to have to be tried, and it was going to take several years to work through the courts. And so what happened was that the Department of Transportation then issued a rule, because they have rulemaking authority that was granted by Congress, to basically say that under our new rule, the presumption of disadvantage no longer applies, and that everyone must demonstrate through a particularized statement of disadvantage how they've been disadvantaged. But they also added to that, you cannot use race as the basis for your statement of disadvantage. In other words, you can't say, well, because I'm Black, they did this to me. You have to say, I was disadvantaged because of whatever other reasons. And so it's more complicated than it should be, probably because of that. But all of the lawyers who I talked to about it felt that given the fact that Congress delegated rulemaking authority to the Department of Transportation, that there was no way to necessarily win a case challenging it. And so now what's happening is a number of state departments of transportation are having to recertify all of your previously certified airport concession disadvantaged business enterprises, or what we call ACDBEs, and regular disadvantaged business enterprises, or DBEs. And this is having a huge impact, particularly on DBEs, because there are billions of dollars in transportation dollars that are going through without any goals. And of course, if there are no goals for participation, then these people will not get contracts. And so we've already seen a tremendous drop off in the number of contracts, federal contracts, and DBE contracts uh, since this interim final rule was issued in October.
When you say you've seen a drop off, does that mean the number of contracts that are offered that are out for bid, or just the number of applicants that actually qualify as disadvantaged to apply?
Well, with federal contracting, we've seen a huge drop in the percentage of contracts that are given to African American businesses in particular. And when it comes to transportation projects, those are administered by state DOTs, state departments of transportation. And those funds generally flow down to airports, which are usually recipients as well. So on those projects, in order to set a goal for DBEs, you have to show some availability of DBEs, and you have to contrast that with their utilization, and then you set a goal for how much utilization you think you can get based on their availability. Well, since everybody's been decertified, and only 8 jurisdictions out of 53 jurisdictions, all 50 states plus Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and the District of Columbia, only 8 of those have already restarted their program. Because to restart your program, you have to recertify up to a certain percentage so you can set a goal. And you also have to do an analysis. You have to do a disparity study to show how you think you ought to set your goal. So it's a process that you go through. So that means that anything that goes on the street now is going out without DBE goals or without ACDBE goals. And so it's very it's having a devastating blow on a number of businesses.
So simply put, Attorney Strong, a lot of the changes with, the DOT's interim final rule, it's having it's a totally negative impact on a lot of Black-owned businesses and women-owned businesses as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, no doubt about it. Definitely a huge impact on Black-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. Both Black-owned businesses and women-owned businesses are included in the DBE program. And so it is definitely having a huge impact on both of those groups.
What are you seeing as a solution? Obviously, I know, and we're going to get into kind of what your firm is doing to help businesses navigate this challenging landscape. But do you see some business owners, throwing up their hands and saying, I'm out of the federal contracts business? Or is this the lifeline for some businesses just to stay open and stay afloat?
Well, it's a lifeline for some businesses. Plus, some of the larger African American owned businesses are in the airport concession space. Now, it hasn't had as drastic an immediate impact on ACDBEs because usually you sign up a contract for a longer period of time. So if you build out uh, say a McDonald's at the Cincinnati airport, well, that's usually a 7 year contract because you got to recoup the cost of the build out of the space. And so because those are generally longer term contracts, the impact has not been felt as quickly on those businesses. But then you have spaces that come available all the time. And for those new spaces that come available, if you haven't already been able to recertify a sufficient number of ACDBs to set a goal, then you may not be able to have a goal for, utilization of ACDBEs on that new procurement. So it's going to affect airport concessionaires a little bit more slowly. For construction contracts, it's more immediate. And for professional services contracts, architects, engineers, people who do soil testing, those kinds of contracts, it's having an immediate impact because you've got contracts that are going out with no goals for DBE participation whatsoever.
And you mentioned that only 8 out of the 53 jurisdictions, I guess they're kinda up to speed. What is everyone else doing? Like, what does that timeline look like for everyone else to be where they should be?
Well, one of the things they did was they set a rule that, there is no deadline for coming back in, and they did that, about a month after they issued the interim final rule. They issued an amended interim final rule that says there's no deadline. So different states are moving at different paces. And so, but each state is trying to get a critical mass of certified firms so that they can then begin process of going through the steps they have to take to do goal setting. So it's just very problematic on a lot of levels. But what is happening in some states, there are a lot of states that have very committed staff and that are trying to recertify people as quickly as they possibly can.
Got it. Got it. Thanks so much for that. Folks, we're here talking with attorney Rodney K. Strong, the CEO and co founder of Griffin and Strong PC. Attorney Strong, obviously, with all of the changes happening in the federal landscape, what is your firm doing to help businesses, specifically Black businesses, navigate these changes?
Well, we're working with a number of businesses, helping them draft their narrative. Of course, we talk to them, interview them, ask them about all of their experiences, and then assist them with that process of making sure that they have a narrative that we think will be sufficient, and we help guide them through the process of putting together a strong narrative. So we've been working with a number of businesses on that front. We're also working with, several state DOTs because the DOTs are having to navigate this space as well. And so we've been working with the DOTs to figure out exactly how many firms they need to get certified, and then how they will go about a process of conducting an analysis, which we do disparity studies, we do analyses, so that they can then begin their goal setting process. And we have our firm did the goal setting for a couple of jurisdictions and for airports over a number of years. So we've got a lot of expertise in that area. So we've been working with those. They call them recipients because they're recipients of federal funds, and we've been working with several recipients as well.
Got it, got it. So it sounds like the work you're doing is is really helping these businesses stay afloat and navigate what's happening right now. Attorney Strong, what are your tips for HBCU students who may have an interest in going into law, specifically federal contracts and compliance?
Well, the first thing I would say is, make sure that you have very strong writing skills. I advise all pre-law students to take as much English as you can. I know this is going to sound counterintuitive, but I also advise them to take as much math as they can because, interestingly enough, just the discipline that you have to work through math on a regular basis, you find that you can use those skills when you get to law school. And it doesn't really matter what your social science background is, or even if you have a technical background like engineering, you can get into law school with those things. But if you don't have strong writing skills, you're going to find law school a difficult slog. And if you're not disciplined about studying on a consistent basis. So that's just the technical side of things. Morehouse has a program that a number of alumni started. It's called the Judson Lyons Society. It's named after Judson Lyons, who was the first Morehouse man to become an attorney in Georgia back before the turn of the 20th century. And about 30 of us who are lawyers who work with the students that go to Morehouse and Spelman and Clark and the other schools in the AU Center. And so we're always working to help students navigate that space. Now, to respond specifically to procurement policy, I think it's important to understand public policy, period. So if you really have an interest in procurement, I think it's very important to understand how public policy works. And so that's really the area that procurement falls within when you talk about public procurement. And so it's very important to take the courses that you would need to take to really understand public policy. And so I think that we've had a number of students that have done extremely well who had public policy backgrounds because so much of what we do is tied to how you shape public policy.
Hmm. Hmm. Very important, super helpful advice. I'm going to go back. This is on the legal front. I know that you work and are an expert in supplier diversity, but I want to break that down for our audience here at Classes in Session. Essentially, what is happening on the supplier diversity front? For example, do hotels, for example, as a corporation, have certain goals of, hey, for our suppliers that give us soap, towels, sheets, we want to have X percentage of our suppliers be minority, either racial or gender. How have things changed on the corporate side with supplier diversity, as well as on the federal and state contract side?
Yeah, that's a great question because there have been efforts to make sure that minority businesses, African American owned businesses, women owned businesses, other minority owned businesses are integrated into the spend of various corporations. So most of the major corporations that you would think about have had historically some type of a supplier diversity program. Um, and all of these really trace back to what I talked about earlier. They trace back to the efforts of Dr. King. They trace back to Reverend Jesse Jackson, the late Reverend Jesse Jackson, who took over Operation Breadbasket and negotiated fair trade agreements with a number of major corporations. And so most major corporations have some programs. That's why you see, if you look at the B100 list, you see a lot of auto suppliers based in the Detroit area. You see companies like Bing Steel and other companies like that that were able to supply for major corporations. And so there's an organization called the National Minority Supplier Development Council, which has historically worked very closely across the country with all of the major Fortune 500 companies to ensure that they have diversity. And there are regional supplier diversity councils around the country. Here in Georgia, we have the Georgia Minority Supplier Diversity Council. And so all of these uh, efforts are to get businesses opportunities on the corporate side. And a lot of times they're even more lucrative in terms of your margins than government contract. And so what's going on right now is that a new executive order was issued a couple of months ago. It's being challenged. There are two lawsuits, one by the National Association of Minority Contractors and the group, a higher education group, and they're challenging it on First Amendment grounds. And then there is a challenge from the uh, Attorney General of Nevada, along with 19 other attorney generals that are challenging this executive order on the grounds that it violates the Administrative Procedures Act. So there are two challenges to it, but this particular executive order is targeting the private sector. It's basically saying that if you have a supplier diversity program, that we could consider it to be illegal DEI. They don't really well define it very well, but they basically say the Justice Department can then investigate your company. So obviously that has a chilling effect on a major company. And they recently put pressure on IBM, and IBM settled a case for $17 million. They have a case right now that they brought against the New York Times for their diversity, equity, and inclusion program. They're trying through this executive order to stamp out any type of corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion program. And so right now, the legal front is to fight in court to try to stop the executive order. And of course, like I said, there are two lawsuits that are targeting this particular executive order, but it is definitely having a chilling effect on the ability of Black-owned businesses to maintain their relationships with their corporate partners.
That's interesting to know that, in a sense, it sounds like the corporate folks have it's like they've been threatened in a sense to comply, or are they at risk of losing access to apply for federal grant dollars?
Well,
Federal contracts.
not on that, federal contracts. I mean, I think that's the reason IBM settled, because most people don't realize, you hear a company like IBM, you think about them and the private sector stuff that they do. Most people don't realize that these companies are major suppliers to the federal government. They supply massive amounts of consulting work to the federal government. And so all of the federal contractors, those who have large federal contracts or any federal contracts, and almost every major corporation does, names that you wouldn't think of are major suppliers to the federal government, because the federal government is such a massive, employer. And it hires so many companies to do various things that you wouldn't think of.
Interesting. This is really interesting. Interesting stuff. I bet there is not a dull day in your office, Attorney Strong, especially with all that's happening now. So we're excited
Yeah.
and proud of you for staying on top of it. Speaking of other folks who are proud of you, the Georgia Minority Supplier Development Council honored you with its Blue Legend Award last fall. Tell us a little bit about the award and what that means to you.
Well, I was pleasantly surprised to get the award. But the thing that was shocking about receiving that award was the fact that, uh, for me, so many of the previous recipients were people that were my heroes, people that I knew personally, and that were, extraordinary business people here in Georgia. And so people like Herman Russell had received it in the past. And of course, he was always on the B 100 list, I believe, his whole career. He was on from the time they started the B 100 list, he was on the B 100 list. Uh, and he was a recipient. There were other luminaries that had received it. So it meant a lot to me.
Awesome. Awesome. Very glad to hear that and very well deserved. Listen, Attorney Strong, obviously you spend your days at an actual law firm, and there are so many law shows out right now. This is just a fun question to find out. Do you actually watch any of the law shows on TV? And if so, do you have a favorite one?
I have not had time in a long time. If I tell you the last law show that I watched, you would laugh because it's been that long ago.
Go ahead
But
and tell us. Go ahead and tell us.
okay, L.A. Law was the last law show I actually looked at on a regular
That's all
basis.
right. It's been a minute. But
That's been a long time.
do the shows seem true to life in terms of the things that you deal with each day as an attorney, or is it purely drama?
Well, a lot of the things are very similar to things that come up from time to time, but they don't happen in the rapid succession that they happen in the shows. There's, you know, but yeah, there are several shows, and of course, you got all these reality shows out now as well. And just interestingly enough, two of the two of the judges that are on TV are people that I know and have known a long time. Judge Glenda Hatchett, who has her own syndicated show, is from Atlanta,
Mhm.
and I've known her since she was a student at Emory University Law School. And Judge Joe Brown, I met him literally the first day I was in law school at the University of Memphis. And so a couple of the TV judges I actually personally know.
That's really cool. I think that's a really cool thing. Before we close, obviously, Attorney Strong, you and your firm have been working with businesses to navigate through the changes that are happening now. But I don't want to discourage anyone who may be watching and they are just getting a business started. So do you have maybe just 3 tips for a new entrepreneur, someone who's just starting their business, they're interested to get into the contracting space, whether that's local, state, federal? What might your tips be, especially as the landscape is changing, but to keep them encouraged because there's a lot of Black businesses and business owners that have fantastic ideas, and we're always excited to highlight them here at Black Enterprise. But what would your tips be to encourage new business owners?
Yeah, I think if you are business owner who has a successful product, you've been successful in the private sector, and you see an opportunity in the corporate sphere or in government, don't be discouraged by the fact that the programs that were designed to give us a opportunity to get our foot in the door have been disfavored, because you still have an opportunity to go in the front door and present your uh, credentials and to present your skills and to show how things are done. I always suggest that anybody who does government contracting request the previous, whoever is the current contract holder, start looking well in advance. There are some governments like the city of Chicago, other governments that do a forecasting process where they identify the things in their budget in advance, and they supply you with a book that says these are the things we're going to be buying next year. But you can always look at the budget of the government in advance to see if they're planning on having a major project that is in your area, things that you're particularly interested in. You have to start really early. Any major project, you have to start really early. There's a minority-owned business here in Atlanta that's a mover, and they recognize that one of our major Fortune 100 companies was about to renovate their headquarters, and they were going to need somebody to move the furniture off of a floor that was being renovated, and then move that furniture back or move in new furniture. And so they started working through the process with meeting the executives of the company, showing up at all of the events that they had for their procurement department very early on, and ultimately got the contract to do all of the moving. And it turned out to be years worth of work. And so it's really important to do forecasting, look at budgets. And also, if someone has a contract now and you see this as an opportunity for your business, if it's in the public sphere, you can request an open records request so that you can see the contract, you can see the bid amount, you can see who else bid, you can see the bid sheet, the bid tabulation sheet to see how much other folk bid, so that you can begin to refine your pricing. And the third thing I would say is this: every time you bid and don't get a project, ask for a debriefing. Why did you not select me for this? Was it my price? Was it my experience? Was it the way I prepared my bid or my proposal? All of those things are important. And I think you got to spend the time to do that, and at any given time, we're going through a bid review. We're on a project we didn't get. We're starting up a new project that we did get. We're looking at a project that we think might hit the street as an RFP down the road. All of those things need to be done simultaneously when you're running a business that's looking to scale beyond, mom and pop.
Got it. Really, really helpful tips, especially the notion of the debrief to really find out why you weren't selected, what you can do to improve. That's really, really helpful advice. Attorney Strong, tell us, what are your daily words to live by?
Well, I think the main daily word I have is integrity. Every day I get up and say, hey, I'm going to try to be true to my mission. I'm going to try to be true to what I was called to do. And I'm going to be honest about it. There's so much dissembling out there. And I try to always make sure that I shoot everybody straight, because we don't really have a lot of time to waste trying to figure out what people really mean. So I try to be direct. And so we have a motto at our firm: integrity, transparency, and service. And those are my words to live by. Integrity, because we want to always be honest and straightforward. Transparency, whatever done in the dark will come to light. So we want to keep everything in the light all the time. And then we want to be of service to the community all the time.
Integrity, transparency, and service. Attorney Rodney K. Strong, what's next for you?
Well, at my age, I should be retired, but I'm having such a good time. I'm just keep on working. So
And nothing wrong with that. I mean, honestly, you're helping the minority business community with your years of experience in doing so. So as long as you can keep doing it, Attorney Strong, stay strong and keep doing it. That's those are my parting words to you. Keep doing it. Keep doing it, brother. We're very proud of you here at Black Enterprise.
Well, thank you so much.
Awesome. And listen, for folks watching, you can find out more about attorney Rodney K. Strong, gspclaw.com. That stands for Griffin Strong PC Law, gspclaw.com, to find out more about what they do in helping with procurement diversity, procurement equity rather, and supplier diversity program development. So he's a big deal in this space. So stay posted for all that he's doing. Attorney Strong, we thank you for being here at Classes in Session. For those of you watching, be sure to share this episode with family, friends, particularly the business owners in your life or even aspiring business owners. A lot has changed on the federal front, but as Attorney Strong said, that does not mean, if you're new to this, to give up on your dream. Continue to go out there and see what's out there for you to advance and to scale your business. You can also stay posted for the latest and greatest on Black Enterprise's website at blackenterprise.com and on our social media channels. This interview and podcast is also available on Spotify. For this episode of Class is in Session, I'm your host, Ashley Stevens, and class is dismissed.